Hello, I'm Pastor Ari Mattson from Martin Luther Church at 93rd and Blue Mound in Milwaukee, and this is AfterWords for January 1st, 2012, my first AfterWords blog for the new year. This past weekend, our text was Luke 2 with Mary and Joseph going into the temple and meeting Zechariah and Anna. As I was preparing for this sermon, though, one of the things that struck me is actually found in the texts around this text that I thought was really fascinating. If we go through the first 3 chapters of Luke's Gospel here, I think Luke is doing something really interesting and subtle with the story that he's telling. If we go back to the very first chapter in verse 5, Luke writes, "In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah." And then if we skip forward to the beginning of chapter 2, in those days a decree went out from Emperor Augustus that all the world should be registered. It was the first registration which was taken while Quirinius was governor of Syria, and Joseph went to Nazareth with Mary. And then if we skip forward again to the beginning of chapter 3, here Luke writes, "In the 15th year of the reign of Emperor Tiberius, when Pontius Pilate was governor of Judea, and Herod was ruler of Galilee, and his brother Philip, ruler of the region of Iturea and Trachonitis, and Lysanias, ruler of Abilene, during the high priesthood of Annas and Caiaphas, the word of God came to John, son of Zechariah, in the wilderness." Now what's interesting about these 3 pieces is that I think that Luke is very subtly putting forward the fact that here in this kind of small, off the beaten path, off the main map kind of place, in Nazareth and Galilee and beyond the Jordan with John, that in these places God is at work. And God is at work not in the great and wonderful and amazing powers of the day, not in Emperor Augustus or Tiberius or in Herod or Pontius Pilate, not in any of these great and powerful leaders, but that God is at work in simple, ordinary people. That God is at work under the radar of all of the major events of the day. Luke is pointing out that Jesus is happening under the big news headlines' noses. Luke's pointing out that these simple people, Zechariah, Joseph and Mary, John the Baptist, from simple places, they're the ones that are proclaiming the good news. They're the ones that are forwarding the kingdom. They are the ones that are connected to God and doing God's will. And even though these other bigger things seem to be happening, that God is actually working through much subtler ways. And I think this is an important and amazing reminder for us today, when there are so many big and amazing events that go on all around us, between presidents and prime ministers and armies all around the world, and all of the turmoil that goes around in the world, to be reminded that God works not necessarily through huge and important events, but very often God works most powerfully in subtle and small ways through ordinary people like you and like me. This is the pattern that we've seen throughout the Bible. If you go back and read through it, Abraham was too old, Jeremiah was too young, Gideon came from the wrong family, David was too small, Jacob was a liar, Moses had a speech impediment, but these are the people that God chooses again and again, not because they're perfect, not because they've got everything together, but because their imperfections allow the glory of God to show that much brighter. Because they are imperfect, God can use them to bring forward God's will. And so as we start this new year, 2012, I hope that you can recognize and look for the ways that God can work through and use you to bring forth the kingdom. The ways that God is calling you to do amazing and important things in our own corner of the world. I hope and pray this year that you recognize the glory of God that works through you. May you feel the presence of the Spirit calling you to do important things, not because of how great you are, but because God can still work through us, because God's glory can shine through our imperfections and illuminate this world. May this be a blessed and holy year for you as God calls you forth to do God's work. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next week.